Emma Panteli, the Chief of Staff, Head of Government Relations with Reaction Engines. Thanks for joining us on Australia in Space TV.
Thanks for having me.
Emma, you've just taken on the role of Chief of Staff, so I definitely want to sort of get a background on that particular role. Sounds very government related, so obviously been Head of Government Relations, but maybe just an introduction to Reaction Engines, doing some very interesting things in hypersonics and the like. But you've been around for a little while. So maybe, a briefing on Reaction Engines.
Yeah, absolutely. So Reaction Engines is a private UK company. We have around 250 highly skilled people in the UK, but we do also have a kind of presence in the US and a team in the US, and we have a testing facility over there as well, so we can maybe touch on that. We've developed quite a good reputation as a high-profile technology and innovator. We have this unique capability, basically, that's focused on disruptive thermal management technology. Most of people would know us for SABRE, the synergetic air-breathing rocket engine, and what we've done with that technology is we've actually spun it out into several different commercial markets. So less relevant to space, but we are looking at energy, automotive, sustainable aerospace as well. We're also taking that technology, we can go onto this a bit later, to kind of accelerate some of the hypersonics discussions happening across the globe at the moment as well.
You do sound like you're doing a lot with 250 staff. Even having looked through the website, you're based in Colorado as well as Oxfordshire in the UK. But you've also been involved with the DARPA program in the US. And one thing I wanted to touch on with you today was also the UK-Australia Space Bridge and what you might be doing in Australia and the region. Maybe we'll just touch on that for our own audience here in terms of what's this UK-Australia Space Bridge mean for you, or is it creating new opportunities?
Yeah, we're hoping, like I said, we are a small but big outlook company wanting to do everything, but at the same time with limited, or not limited, but we do have capacity and we can only do so much. But we are definitely looking at Australia as a strategic partner for our work. We see AUKUS as a really great opportunity for the UK and Australia in collaboration with the US to collaborate on the development of hypersonic technologies, which will obviously lead into kind of launch and space launch as well. And it could also strengthen, Australia and UK's as well as US's ability for technology transfer and investment, which is a great thing. I think with the UK Space Bridge, it's provided lots of different companies with the opportunities to engage with Australia on a more meaningful level. And we've seen that. We've done lots of work with Austrade, and they've been fantastic at connecting us with different companies, and both Austrade and Department of International Trade on our side have been collaborating and making sure that us at Reaction Engines and other industry companies have been involved in conversations and taking forward what the UK Space Bridge could look like for the future. I think what would be really great is, given that we've got AUKUS, we've got the UK Space Bridge, there might be an opportunity for the Space Bridge to become a part of AUKUS in some way, to develop the space part a bit more in a bit more depth.
You've been in the role in sort of Head of Government Relations for about a year. Have you noticed much change over that year? Because I think the Space Bridge arrangement's only about 18 months or so old. And AUKUS, again, is probably coming up to about a year old as well. Have you noticed that immediate sort of trigger for discussions?
I would say in the past maybe 6 months, I'd say Farnborough Air Show over in the UK, there seemed to be a lot of activity and a lot more engagement on the Australia and UK side. I understand that these things obviously take a while to set up and understand what the governance and the structures around it. But I would say both governments have been fantastic at including industry and their involvement. And I think the next step is just taking that forward, and how can we both benefit from different opportunities, working together, skills, innovation, diversity, and also perhaps using creating that suitable regulatory environment where we can work together collaboratively, and perhaps even enabling a technology sandbox for hypersonic developments and things like that. Well, so it's taking it to that next step, I
was going to say, hopefully from a skill set from Australia's perspective as well, 250 staff, there should be, I would hope, some opportunity for Australian sort of workforce development potentially as well. Now, you've just raised another £40 million with the Strategic Development Fund as well out of the UAE. What's your outlook for 2023? And we'll finish off with your role as Chief of Staff, but what's the general outlook for Reaction Engines for this year or the immediate term?
It's a really great question, and I think 2023 is going to be a great year, especially now that we've had this fundraise, we can hit the ground running. We're looking forward to working with the UAE on some strategic opportunities in the region, and also what's great about kind of the international engagement is it can help our engagement with other international partners such as Australia. In terms of 2023, we've got lots going on our commercialized technology that I touched on earlier in terms of sustainable aviation, energy, automotive. With space, you would have seen recently that the UK attempted to have our first horizontal space launch from Spaceport Cornwall that unfortunately had that anomaly that happened. I think it's very classic of Britons to call things a failure and get really down in the dump about it, but I actually think it was such a great thing that happened. Spaceport Cornwall have created an environment and an excitement for space launch in the UK, and I think that's such a fantastic thing. And really, I want reaction engines and other space companies to be building on that excitement, on that buzz, and to almost take that Australian and American mentality of like nothing's a failure because you just build upon your lessons and you take it forward. And I'm excited to do some of that work. And one of the key areas we're looking at is responsive launch as well. So we've got a project at the moment with the MOD and the Ministry of Defence, in the UK, DSDL, which is part of the Ministry of Defence in the UK, and Rolls-Royce, to develop a reusable hypersonic vehicle. And that at the moment, that currently does have a defence focus, but really looking forward to seeing how the technology within that could be taken forward to enable responsive launch. So kind of breaking down some of those barriers around green lighting when launch can happen. And, given the geopolitical situation we're in, looking at being able to rapidly put satellites into space or payloads into space as and when needed in a matter of, minutes or hours rather than like months. So that's one of the things that we're hoping to accelerate under this program we have with the Ministry of Defence.
Well, I mentioned the SDF, but yeah, you've just mentioned Rolls-Royce. You've got BAE Systems in there as well. So you're very well backed. So you've got that good defence pedigree. Chief of Staff, it does sound very governmental in its own right. What's the role of a Chief of Staff, particularly from the audience perspective, anyone who wants to potentially reach out to you? How would you just describe your role of Chief of Staff and Head of Government Relations?
Yeah, sure. I describe my role in multiple ways depending on the audience, which is such a politician's answer. Basically, in my role, I act as a strategic advisor to our CEO, Mark Thomas. That means I support the implementation of strategic initiatives, and I drive the company's political and stakeholder engagement that then supports our business objectives. In UK terms, I kind of describe it almost as like we have SPAD, special advisors to ministers. So, I'm like a SPAD to our CEO. I'm not sure what the equivalent is in Australia to describe it to your audience.
Chief of Staff, yeah, they do use those roles, but not often in a commercial sort of setting, I suppose. What's your background, Emma? I think hopefully it can inspire some younger people to get into the space industry.
Yeah, so I'm actually a little bit gutted that I'm not an engineer. I was really bad at maths when I was younger. Although I'm great at statistics now, it's a weird turnaround for me. But my background is largely in aerospace and defence. So I was previously at Serco as a defence engagement lead. And as you know, Serco is also a global company, which also has involvement in Australia as well. Great. And in space. There I was seconded into the UK Ministry of Defence as a strategy lead, and I was working with the Defence Engineering Champion team, where they made me an honorary engineer, so I do have that in my pocket to pull out. But I've also spent time in the Cabinet Office within government in the UK, UK Parliament as well, working for a couple of members of Parliament, and ADS, which is the UK's Trade Association for Aerospace, Defence, Security and Space. So my whole career has basically been quite aerospace and defence focused, albeit a little bit accidentally to begin with, but it's an area that I just really enjoy working in and find it fascinating.
What was the accident? What actually got you in there, or was it just happened to be the first job that you landed?
I've always been very interested in international relations, and I think that was kind of my interest and my passion. And I did kind of international politics at university. And then I ended up working in Parliament, and it just so happened to be the MP I worked for, his constituency built the Trident nuclear submarine. So then I got a really good idea of like the UK defence industry landscape, how important it was for jobs and investment and skills. And that's where I kind of got more of the industry knowledge, I suppose.
Very good. I'm supposed to finish off. What's your personal sort of outlook and where you see the industry, particularly the UK industry as well, the space sector, and what's happening globally, along with the partnerships as well? This is on the back of a US-Japan space arrangement as well. It does seem to be going from strength to strength. What's your general outlook for the industry over the next sort of 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, the outlook is great. The economic benefits that space could bring on a global stage is phenomenal. But not all of that. It's also thinking about the dual use capabilities and how we can utilize space not only for commercial means, but for, like I mentioned earlier, the defense and security needs. But for my kind of short-term outlook, you can definitely see there's a trend for international collaboration. And that's why I think the AUKUS agreement, the Japan agreement you mentioned just now, the UK-Australia Space Bridge is so important to ensure that we are kind of talking to our allies and not doing things in silos. I'm one of these people who's, very anti-working in silos, and you've got great partners or allies that you can engage with. And I think what we all need to do, UK, Australia, America, is just ensure that we have that right environment, whether it's regulatory, whether it's kind of the testing environment, like I mentioned earlier, skills, diversity, just ensure that we have that environment that works so that we can accelerate that technology for the right reasons.
Wonderful.
It's going to be a great year. Yeah.
Well, it should be. And hopefully we'll catch up potentially in Colorado later in the year in April. It's reactionengines.co.uk. It's worth checking it out. And we would be here literally for days if we started to cover the technology side of things, let alone the partnerships and your particular role. But Emma Panteli, the Chief of Staff and Head of Government Relations with Reaction Engines there in the UK, thank you very much for joining us on Australia in Space TV.
Thanks, Chris.